Well, welcome to another episode of Pursuit. I'm Pastor Rick, and I'm joined today with someone that may not be familiar to some of you. He has been coming to our church. He's just recently joined our church, and that's Matt McNeill. Matt, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Matt, you've been with our church for a couple months now. You joined our church, I think it was a month ago. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about you, just a little bit about you and your fiance, Sarah.
Yeah, so I come from Goldsboro, North Carolina, and she comes from Randleman, North Carolina. She is dual majoring at UNCG in special ed, elementary ed, and then I actually got my undergrad from Carolina right across the street in biblical studies. And right now I am currently pursuing an MDiv.
Yeah.
So,
And then you might go get another master's degree?
Yeah, they fit into each other, the two programs.
Because you're trying to collect all the master's degrees.
Right, I'm trying to collect them all.
Right, just like Thanos. And then you're going to snap, fix everything.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Right,
so.
And with that reference, we may have lost a lot of our
we definitely
viewership.
have.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, what we do normally, if you've ever watched an episode of Pursuit, you've watched several of these. You were correct? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is we always start with an icebreaker.
Okay.
And if you've watched any of our other episodes, me and Pastor Harper were really scraping the barrel of the bottom of the barrel trying to find good icebreakers. But so he found he ordered this collection of icebreakers, and we don't know what we're going to pull out of the hat.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes it can be really awkward and kind of fun. But since you're a guest, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out first, and you have to you have to be on the spot and answer the question first.
Sure.
That's how we treat our guests here. Okay. All right. So here we go. The first question, or the icebreaker is, okay. All right. This is going to be going. Tell about the worst meal you've ever eaten.
The worst meal I've ever eaten. Yeah. Well, Rick, this is a little awkward.
Okay.
Because you remember the last time I was at your house for dinner?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that might be the worst meal that I personally have ever eaten. Excuse me.
There's nothing in that. Don't even act like there's.
Well, you know,
you're just stalling because you know Jill's watching.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right, so I know this story, so you need to tell why it was tough for you.
Okay, so personally, this particular meal was tough for me because it was a broccoli and cheese casserole, and anybody who knows me well, except for Jill, because I didn't share this with her, knows that I cannot stand broccoli and cheese. And so it wasn't that the meal itself was bad, it was that I didn't like the meal. And what Jill still doesn't know,
well, she knows now.
Well, she knows now, yeah. But even though I asked her for the recipe, secretly I might have scraped some of my food into my napkin.
So, and I think that was the best part of this, is that you went so far as to ask for the recipe, just to be that Southern hospitality.
Well, I didn't want to be rude, you know, bless her heart.
Right,
but...
wow, yeah. So I probably wouldn't come over and eat at our house for a while until she gets through this.
Yeah, so...
I don't know what you're going to get.
So we're not having dinner Wednesday then?
Probably not.
Okay,
all right,
works.
So my turn. Now, I've told this story to people, like a few people, but I'm usually I'll eat whatever you serve me. Southern in that way. My dad raised me on, if you don't like it, you don't eat. That's how it works. So I've very rarely pushed a plate away.
Understandable.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, there was this meal one time, and I'm not going to be so brash as to say where it was or who cooked it. That's just rude. What I would do is, it was at a place you and I both were at.
Really?
Yeah. We won't give any more details than that. And you and I both were there, and it was. The main meal that was being served had already been just like picked clean. People had come in, students had come in and eaten the food.
We were at a buffet.
And then, then what was left was a kind of they called it pizza casserole, which I'm like, okay, pizza casserole, how can you go wrong?
I've had pizza casserole.
Yeah, let's move on. And so anyway, the top layer was cheese and pepperoni, so like a top pizza, but underneath it was like spaghetti and meatballs. It was just every Italian thing you put together, jumbled, and it was just, for some reason, I had to go, we're good, and drink a protein shake that day. So
understandable.
I call it the worst meal because I've very rarely not just finished. I just eaten some of it.
Right.
I just said, we're good. We'll take our time somewhere else.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Well, so take some time right now with your group. Hopefully, it's not a meal that the person in the group has shared with you. If that's the case, you might want to pick another one. But talk about the worst meal you've ever eaten. All right, in this week's sermon, Pastor Kivitz shared the second part of his three-part kind of series, mini-series in Ephesians, where he's talking about the three relationships that God uses to change us, to make us more like Jesus. Last week we talked about marriage, and this week we talked about work, because even though the next thing was children and parents, he wants to save that for when the kids are in the service with us. I think it's a great idea.
I think it is too.
So this week we talked about work. And he said there were three things that work does. He asked three questions about how work can make us more like Jesus. But before he got into those questions, he addressed what he called the elephant in the room, the slavery question, because Ephesians chapter 6 starts with slaves obey your earthly masters. And some have used that passage to say that God is condoning slavery. And he talked about it. He addressed it. He said basically what's happening in that passage is that Paul is challenging the church to magnify Christ and love others amid a culture that is classifying individuals based on their social status.
Right.
And so as that kind of thought kind of creeped in my head, I was thinking to myself, what are some, I'm going to use the word social status differences that we have in our culture that we could even begin to, see people differently?
Right, yeah, and I think that's a great question, and I think it boils down pretty simply. You have the the stereotypical upper class and the middle class, upper and lower middle class, and then you've got the lower class, what we would consider that, and
poverty line area,
right, poverty line area, and even in that, you've got blue collar workers, you've got white collar workers, and I think depending on where somebody's at, you just automatically look at them differently. If they're near the poverty line, you're thinking, wow, that person is really unsuccessful. When in reality, that person may be happier than these guys up here.
Right.
But then you might look at this guy up here, and then you might almost worship people like that. Or on the opposite end of that, you may judge people like that, think that guy's super arrogant, he doesn't care about anything. When this guy's a philanthropist, and so there's just all those different kind of misconceptions I think that people have with based on how much money you make. Yeah,
that's good, Matt. What I'm hearing you say is that we got to look past the status and more at the actual person, because there's stuff going on there we don't even know about.
Right,
That's
right,
good.
Absolutely.
I like that. Well, take some time right now with your group and ask yourself this question. What does it look like in your life to love others, regardless of any difference in status? It may mean that this is something that involves financial status, or like you said, an educational status or something like that. But what does it mean to love others regardless of that, and so to really magnify Christ and show his love to the culture around us?
In the second part of Pastor Kivitz's sermon, he asked the question, what does it look like for you to work with a good attitude? Or rather, he posed the idea of working with a good attitude, and so that really becomes the question. What does that look like? Especially, he talked about the fact, Rick, that some people love their jobs, but other people absolutely despise their jobs. But nonetheless, it is the work that the Lord has given them for a certain time period. And in fact, I've been there. I remember just a few months ago working 2 jobs, 3 a.m. to 5 p.m. I was up every day, and that was rough. And there were times where I personally, was like, God, like I absolutely cannot stand this right now. And so, I totally understand that from a personal viewpoint, but the question is, overall, what does it look like for you to work with a good attitude? It sounds simple, but I think it's a little bit more complex when you get into it.
Yeah, even somebody who enjoys their job, which I do, totally do. My dad always used to tell me, son, you've heard it before, if you do something you love doing, and you'll never work a day in your life. And I really feel, that way. I've enjoyed the jobs I've had. My adult life, I've had those high school and college jobs where I'm like, this is not going to be my career.
Right.
And maybe that could have been our icebreaker, weirdest job you've ever had.
Yeah.
But my adult life has been filled with, these are jobs I enjoy doing, and namely because God has let me be in the ministry in some way, either at a Christian school, college, or here at the church. And so I've enjoyed that. But there are times, even in those, wonderful jobs you have, complaining can set in. You're not happy about a certain direction or some certain thing that happened.
Right.
And so then am I glorifying God with that job? And the answer has to be no. Even Pastor Kivett mentioned laziness and complaining as two of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So take some time right now in your group to ask as a group, what does it look like for you to work at the job you have with a good attitude? You may be able to share some specific stories. You may be in a group right now where you can share a time where even though there was an adverse condition, your good attitude went well, maybe even the other side where a negative attitude served poorly. But take some time right now in your group to discuss what it looks like to serve and work in your job with a good attitude. Well, finally, in this week's sermon, Pastor Kivett wrapped up with the question, what reward are you looking for? What is truly your reward in the service you're doing? Of course, he's talking about, Paul is talking about this in Ephesians, that their reward is in heaven with Christ, that their service here on the earth is not what it's about.
Right.
Their reward is in heaven. He shared the story of the missionaries coming home on the same train as Teddy Roosevelt, and President Roosevelt got this huge ovation. He did not, the missionaries did not, and the missionaries were bothered by it. And then he got this answer from the Lord, the idea of, do you know why you haven't received your reward? It's because you haven't
Right.
got home yet. And so the question I thought we could pose to our groups is, how can we treat our occupation as a ministry? You know, how are we doing this successfully in a way that we can share this with our group?
Right.
Do we see, like for me, my occupation is ministry. So I kind of have a leg up there. And it's been that way for a while, but there are people who are home watching these videos. I work at a Christian school, they may work at a public school.
Right.
And so it's not technically ministry work, but it is ministry work. And I've said before to people that I don't like to use the terms secular and sacred or secular and ministry.
Right.
I think every job is ministry. If you're a Christian, every job is ministry. But how could that work out for some of our people at home? What do you think?
Right. And I think, I think there's a lot of different ways it could play out. I think, if I could share a personal example.
Yeah, please.
For me, full disclosure, at the moment, I work full-time at a fast food place. And that being said, sometimes for me personally, it can be difficult for me to look at that as a ministry. And the reason is because, frankly, we all know that fast food, delicious as it is not that good for you to consume. And so sometimes, I kind of struggle with that. How can I do this in a way that serves others? But I have to remember, I have coworkers around me that are watching how I work, and they're still viewing it as a job as I am.
Yeah.
So, it's good for them to watch me work hard, to see me not complaining. And then also for our customers, it's not my job to regulate who's coming through the line, what they're ordering. My job is to put the food out. And so that being said, being able to do that in the best manner possible, that is my goal. And in that way, even though it sounds simple and cliche, it's do your best where you are put.
Yeah.
And so I think that could work in multiple lines of work. Of course, it may look different than me. Everybody looks a little different, but I think that's a good way to look at it.
And as you were talking, I was thinking, because my job is, as I've said, is ministry.
Right.
But as I'm listening to you say what you're saying is maybe God has you at that place because there's that coworker, and just for that time you're together, you're going to somehow affect that coworker's eternity by how you, number one, what you say, what you believe, but even also how you serve, because the things you say are backed up with how you work.
Right, and it's possible, that somebody that maybe I do some planting, somebody else does some watering.
Absolutely.
You never know what God's doing behind the scenes, but
Yeah.
when you look at work in that way, it makes it more fulfilling, especially on the difficult days.
Yeah. So take some time now with your group and ask this question of how can you treat your occupation as a ministry? Maybe you even have a success story that you could share with your group of how God has let you or allowed you to use this job as a ministry and some blessings have come out of it. But take some time right now to discuss this.
Sure.
Well, Matt, thanks for joining us as a surprise guest host this week. It's been good having you.
Yeah, it's been good to be here, Rick.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Maybe next time we'll get you back and you'll be with Harper and you can kind of compare us because there are rumors that I'm the better of the two.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. As always, you can click the links on your screen to see previous episodes of The Pursuit. You can also see the most recent sermon in our sermon series, From Ephesians to Death to Life. You can also click the link on your screen to subscribe to new content as it's released. You'll get notifications as soon as we put out new content. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.